begin. Omer al gabi kelim or al gabi behema or al gabi ragle chavero pasos. Remember again, we're going through the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is detailing the various psulim, the various prohibitions that would invalidate the avodah, and amongst them, if a kohen is standing on top of utensils, on top of kelim, or on top of an animal, right, or on top, or al gabi behema, or on top of the feet of his friend. Ultimately, again, the avodah is possible. We'll say, again, the common denominator being apparently, based on this Mishnah, the kohen has to be standing flush on the floor. If he's not standing on the floor, the avodah is possible. Says the Gemara, Minalan, from where do we know that the kohen has to be standing on the floor, on the ritzpah of the Beis HaMikdash for the avodah to be kosher? The Tana to be Rabbi Shmuel, Hoil v'ritzpah mikudeshas, ukli sharis mikudeshas, because we make a comparison. Just like the floor of the Beis HaMikdash is sanctified, and a kli sharis, we'll say the service utensils used in sacrificial rites and services are sanctified. Ma kli sharis lo yehi davar chotzeis beino lebein kli sharis. But we'll say just like when it comes to a kli sharis, the halacha is that there could be nothing interposing between the kohen and the kli. We've spoken about this extensively already. The kohen can't be wearing a glove, the kohen can't have a bandage, but rather, again, his hand must come in direct contact with the kli. Af ritzpah lo yehi davar chotzeitz beino lebein haritzpah. So too, again, when it comes to the floor, there can't be anything interposing between the kohen and the floor as well. So we'll say utzricha. Now the obvious question that the Gemara deals with is as follows, which is, the Mishnah is teaching me that the kohen needs to be standing on the floor, and there can't be anything standing in between, there can't be any layer interposing between him and the floor. Why do I need all of these cases of a kohen standing on utensils, kohen standing on an animal, kohen standing on the feet of his friend? I mean, okay, I got it. Kohen has to be standing on the floor. If he's not standing on the floor, they have all this puzzle. Why do I need all of these cases? Utzricha, the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. We need all of these cases. Because ultimately, first of all, just before we go on, I'll just show you something interesting. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Hoil v'ritzpah mikudeshes, 4 lines in the short lines of Rashi. So remember again, Rashi makes a statement that the ritzpah, the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, is mikudeshes, is sanctified. So we're going to discuss this more in just a little bit. But Rashi says, La'amod l'shari shari David kitsha b'shtei todos u'b'shir shapagam ki darmina lakam b'shmaitin ki kadosh David. Well, so we are going to see, interestingly enough, that David HaMelech was mekadesh the floor of the Beis HaMikdash. Again, so we will discuss that even though David HaMelech didn't merit to build the Beis HaMikdash, he sanctified the floor of the Beis HaMikdash. So again, so the Gemara now says, why do I need all of these cases? I'll tell you why. Utzricha. Di'ashmo inon kli mishum delav mina debasar ninu. I would have thought that if the kohen is standing on top of a kli, the reason why his avodah is pasul is because if kli is not a form of flesh. So because it is not the form of flesh, ultimately again it interposes between the kohen and the ritzpah. Aval behema dimina debasu imalo. But if the kohen is standing on top of an animal, we'll say the animal is made of flesh, so I might have thought that what? It does not form a chatzitza, it does not interpose between the kohen and the ritzpah, and therefore the avodah should still be good. Furthermore, v'yashmuin on behema, and had the Gemara just taught me the halacha of behema, namely that if the kohen is standing on top of a behema, the avodah is pasul. Delo mina da adamhu, because Rabbi say a behema is not a person. Aval chavero da adamhu emalo, but if he's standing on his friend's feet, because his friend's feet are what? Another human being's feet, perhaps again it doesn't pose a chatzitza issue. Therefore what? Therefore tzricha. Therefore the Gemara says that ultimately again all of these cases are necessary. So we'll say, so bottom line, right? Halacha l'maisa, the kohen must be standing on the ritzpah, must be standing on the floor of the Beis HaMikdash in order for the avodah to be kosher. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Raglo achas alakli, v'raglo achas al haritzpah. We'll say, interesting case. What happens if the kohen has 1 foot on a utensil and 1 foot on the ritzpah? We'll say, what is the halacha? Ultimately, again, so right, what's the status of the avodah? 1 foot on the ritzpah, 1 foot on the kli. So it says, or raglo achas ala even, v'raglo achas ala ritzpah. Or I will say, for that matter, again, 1 foot is on a stone and 1 foot is on the ritzpah. So we'll say, so in this case, again, we've already established than the previous case where the Kohen is actively standing on top of some type of what we'll call alien material, non-ritzpah material, the avodah is possible. What happens if he's got 1 foot on the ritzpah, but 1 foot on something else? How does that impact the avodah? To which the Gemara says something very interesting. Roin, kol she'ilu yinata hakli, vitinata al ha'even. So we'll say, we view it very simply. What would happen if you took away the stone or you took away the kli? Yochel la'amol da raglo achas v'yavod avodaso kshera. If the kohen would be able to balance himself on his 1 foot and still do the avodah, then ultimately the avodah is kosher. Ve'im lav, but if he would fall down, i.e. he would have the inability to balance himself, then what? Avodaso psula. His avodah is a psula. Now, I want to point something very interesting out, which is, this halacha is not unique to avodah. We'll say this is the general halacha. Whenever a person is obligated to stand, but they're leaning on something, so does leaning negatively impact the particular action they're engaged in? And the simple answer is, it depends. What does it depend on? We view it as follows. If you were to take away the object that they're leaning on and they would still stand, then ultimately, again, it's considered as if they're standing. If you were to take away the object that they are leaning on and they would fall, then that's called leaning, and whatever they're doing goes also. So you know where this comes up? This comes up by Mikra Megillah, right? By Shmona Esrei. So we'll say, right? Person's reading by davening for the Amud. It's actually very important halacha. A person davening for the Amud, they are not permitted to lean on the Amud. I mean, you can lean, but not in a way that supports your weight. The moment it supports weight, that's no longer Amida. Say a person's davening Shmona Esrei, a person can't lean. A person wants to hold the stender, that's fine. But if the stender is supporting my weight to the point that if it would be taken away, I would fall down, that's not called tefillah ba'amida. Mishnah Berurah says explicitly, the Balkori for the Megillah, because it's spread out like an Igeres, sometimes it's tempting to lean. Again, you're permitted to lean over, but not in a way in which you support your weight against the bima. So let's say, same idea over here. So the Kohen has 1 foot on the kli, 1 foot on the even. So is the avodah ksher or not? It depends. Is he supporting a significant amount of weight on this other item to the point that if it were taken away he would fall down? Then the avodah is possible. But if he's not really resting a significant amount of weight, and even had it been removed, the avodah he would still be standing. The avodah is kosher. Good. By Rabbi Ami, we'll say another interesting case. So Rabbi Ami asked the following kasha: Nidaldala ha'even va'amadaleha mahu. We'll say, look at Rashi. It's Rashi almost right across. Nidaldala. Even achos me'avana mikviusa u'misanenes birasa. So we'll say, here's the case. The case is where, so if you can imagine for a moment, the floor of the Beis HaMikdash is made of tiles, marble tiles. So if you can imagine for a moment, one of the tiles becomes detached, right? But it's sitting in its, I don't know what you call it, I'll call it like the socket. I don't know if that's the right term. But it's sitting in the socket. So it was detached. So we'll say, what's the chab? The chab is that when you stand on it, what happens? It's shaky. So you feel it moving, it's loose. So what's the halacha? So we'll say, what's the halacha if the Kohen does the avodah while standing on the technically detached marble tile? So again, remember, it's in the ground, but it's essentially detached from the rest of the floor and it's shaky. What's the status? So it says the Gemara, so we'll say, if I have absolutely no intention to go ahead and what? To go ahead and reattach it, then it certainly serves as a chatzitza. Or as we'll say, if I have absolutely no intention to reattach it, then chaitza. Then ultimately, again, it serves as a chatzitza. Kiti ba'ilecha. We'll say, when does the kasha come up? Didaito lechabra. We'll say, let's say again, now it's loose, but what? But I'm going to reattach it. So what do we say? Kivan didaito lechabra kimad bechabra dami. So we'll say, do we say that since it's my intention ultimately to reattach it, therefore what? It's as if it's attached already. O dilma hashta miyahat talisha. Or we'll say, do we say, no, at the end of the day, right now it's detached. And because it's detached, it's as if what? The Kohen is not standing on the ritzpah during the avodah, and therefore the avodah is possible. We'll say Chav Dalid Amud Aleph right across from Tosos Hoil. Rabba Zuti, Boy Lahachi. So we'll say, so the Gemara asks that question, and then the Gemara kind of leaves that question alone. Rabbi Zuta comes along and he reframes the question a little bit differently. So Rabbi Zuti, boy lehachi, he said the question is as follows. Boy Rabbi Ami asked, Ne'ekra ha'even va'amad bimkoma mahu. Let's say he asked the following kasha. What happens if the stone was uprooted and he stood in his place? This is a different case. Look at Rashi. Ne'ekra. Rashi says legamrei. V'haguma niris sham va'amad beguma va'avad. Also, this is really quite fascinating. What's this case? This case over here is, let's say the tile was actually taken up. The tile came out of place. So what do you have? You have an empty hole. You have dirt. The Kohen stands inside that square during the avoda and does the avoda. So so now the shaila is, what is the status of that avoda? So we'll say this is even a more dramatic case. Apparently, according to Rabbi Ami, or I should say according to Rabbi Zuti's version, if the tile is there but loose, everyone will agree that what? That's the floor. That's fine. Meaning it's the floor is intact. Okay, it has to be whatever, secured in place. But the Maisa, that's the floor. The real kasha is what happens if the tile comes out. So mamish is a hole, and the Kohen stands in that hole during the avoda. What's the status of the avoda? So the Gemara says, Mau. So my kami barile. So what's the fundamental shayla that's being asked over here? Ki kaddish David ritzpa el Yona kaddish al dilma ad la'aris titahoma kaddish. So we'll say what the shayla at play over here is as follows: when David HaMelech sanctified the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, did he just sanctify the surface floor, which would be the tile floor, or did he sanctify the floor all the way to the tom? Now, obviously, remember, David HaMelech didn't build the Beis Hamikdash, right? He didn't, but remember, as we just saw before in Rashi, he provided some of the sanctification. We'll discuss what exactly the mechanics of this is. How can you sanctify something that doesn't yet exist? So when David HaMelech sanctifies the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, did he provide that it's the actual, we'll call it marble floor, tile floor, physical floor? Or he said, no, the entire floor area from the surface all the way to the Tahom is all Kodesh. So we'll say the nafkamina between that will be, in a case where we'll say, the tile is removed. If David HaMelech just sanctified the surface area, then what? Then if the Kohen stands in the hole in the floor, they have all this puzzle. If, however, he sanctified the floor all the way until the Tahom, then what? Then ultimately the avoda will be kosher. Viti baile. So the Gemara says, Viti baile, kol ha'azara kula Viti baile, kol ha'azara kula. So I don't understand, says the Gemara. If that's the case, then why are you framing this as only if one tile is missing? Why don't you ask a more dramatic question? Let's say the floor of the Beis Hamikdash was taken up. Right, they're taking up the floor. So we'll say, right, they're rehabbing the Beis Hamikdash. So the floor is removed, and now all you have is dirt. So can you do the avoda on that dirt surface or not? To which the Gemara says, the olam pshita le da'ad aris titahoma kaddish. And we'll say, in reality, we know that David HaMelech sanctified the floor of the Beis Hamikdash from the surface all the way to the Tahom, all the way to the depths. So what is the kasha that is being asked here? Derech sheirus bekach or ein derech sheirus bekach? We'll say the fundamental question over here is not on the sanctity of the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. We know, and again, I'll say, I want you to know, we're going to spend time on this, discussing Davidic sanctification of the floor. So the Gemara's kasha is not on how far the sanctification of the floor extends downwards. But the Gemara's kasha is, we'll say over here is as follows: is the Kohen standing on a dirt floor considered to be a proper form of service or not? That's what it means, derech sherus. If you look at Rashi, derech sherus bekach, mi havi orach ara u mikra sherus o lo. We'll say, is this considered to be normative, proper, and bakavadik for the avoda or not? That's the real kasha. What's the nature ultimately again of this type of avoda? So to which the Gemara says, teku. To which we'll say the Gemara says the truth is, we're not sure. So we'll say it's one of these very interesting cases where the floor is still considered to be the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. And it definitely has Kedushas Hamikdash. The Shaila is standing on a dirt floor befitting of the Avodah, and therefore reaches the threshold of Sheirus or not, to which the Gemara says Teku. Good. Weiter. Kibel b'small pasal. So we'll say next case in the Mishnah, if the Kohen went ahead and did Kabbalah, received the blood with his left hand, then ultimately, again, the avoda is pasul. Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. So it says the Gemara Tan Rabbanan be'etzba v'lokach melamed shelo tehei kabbalah ela biyamin. So we'll say this is actually quite interesting. Let's spend a moment taking a look at this pasuk. So the pasuk in its entirety is as follows: V'lokach hakohen midam achatas be'etzba'o v'nasan al karnos mizbach ha'olah. So we'll say it's at the chatas. The kohen will go ahead and take of the dam of the chatas with his finger, and he shall place it on the corners of the mizbeach. So let's remember again, this is talking about the specific type of chatas where the blood is not sprinkled, but rather the blood is actively applied. So the Gemara is going to make an interesting drasha. The pasuk says be'etzba v'lokach. So we'll say the word be'etzba is written in the middle of two verbs. One is v'lokach, he shall take, and one is v'nasan, he shall place. So the Gemara says be'etzba v'lokach. The word be'etzba follows on v'lokach to teach me that what? Malamed shlote kabbalah el biyamin. Ultimately to teach me that Kabbalah receiving of the blood should only be done with the right hand. Be'etzba v'nasan. Then I will say, remember it also says be'etzba and then v'nasan. Melamed shalote nesina el biyamin. So we'll say the word etzba, which the Gemara's darshaning means to do with the right hand, we'll discuss where that drasha comes from, means, and it's sandwiched in between the two verbs of v'lakach and v'nasan, tells you that Kabbalah has to be done ultimately with the right hand, and Nesina, the placement of the blood on the Mizbeach, also has to be done on the right hand. We'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Be'etzba v'lakach, dichsiv v'lakach ha'kohen midam achadas be'etzba'o, v'nasan al karnos. Hitilu ha'kasav le'etzba bein Kabbalah l'zrika. The Torah placed the word etzba in between Kabbalah receiving the blood and zrika, sprinkling of the blood. Darsheu lefanav ula acharav. And therefore, again, the word etzba, Rabosai, can be darshaned for the word before it and the word after it. V'lakach and v'nasan. Shelo yu ela biyamin. Teaches me that all of these different types of avodah could only be done with the right hand. Diafinan lekaman b'shmaitin kol makom shene'emar etzba eino ela yamin. Any time that the Torah writes etzba, it rather teaches me that what? It's only done with the right hand. To which the Gemara says the following: Amar Rabbi Shimon, v'chi ne'emra yad b'Kabbalah, ela be'etzba'o v'nasan. So Rabbi Shimon says, I don't understand. It doesn't say anything about yad when it comes to Kabbalah. Rather, it just simply says be'etzba'o v'nasan. And what does that teach me? Shelo tehi nesina ela biyamin. So we'll say, interesting, Rabbi Shimon says that the word be'etzba'o goes on v'nasan, doesn't go on v'lakach. Therefore, what is the Torah teaching me? That when there is a blood application to be done, that blood application has to be done with the right hand. The Gemara says, ela be'etzba'o v'nasan, shelo tehi nesina ela biyamin, ho'evelo ne'emra yad b'Kabbalah. Therefore, since the Torah doesn't use the word yad when it comes to Kabbalah, when it comes to receiving the blood, therefore, kibel b'smal kosher. Therefore, ultimately, again, if you receive the blood on your left hand, ultimately, if you receive the blood with your left hand, the Kabbalah will still be kosher. So we'll say, ultimately, again, fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan darshan that the word etzba'o, which they means the right hand, goes on both v'lakach, the Kabbalah, as well as v'nasan. Rabbi Shimon says, no, be'etzba'o only goes on v'nasan. Only tells you that the nesina, the placement of the blood, has to be done on the right hand, but the v'lakach Rabosai does not have the etzba'o modifier, and therefore what? When it comes to Kabbalah, you could receive the blood even with your left hand, and the avodah will be kosher. Reb Shimon, manavshach. Reb Shimon, I don't understand. Manavshach. He is like Gzer Shava. If you hold of the Gzer Shava, which we'll discuss in just a moment, kilo ne'emra yad b'Kabbalah my havi, then even if it doesn't say yad by Kabbalah, you should still require the right hand. V'les like Gzer Shava, and if you don't hold of the Gzer Shava, then what? V'les like Gzer Shava, ki ne'emra yad b'Kabbalah my havi. Then even if it were to say yad b'Kabbalah, ultimately again, what would the halacha be? Or I should say, it wouldn't make any kind of difference. But as I take a look at Rashi for just a moment, it's almost right across in Rashi. Yes like Gzer Shava, di'afinan yad di'kemitza mitzora. So we'll learn this in just a little bit. Make a Gzer Shava of yad from kemitza of mitzora. D'chsiv bei abohen yado hayimanis. Af kol makom shne'emar yad eino elo yamin. So to say from Mitzorah we learned that anytime it says Yad, it's referring ultimately again to the right hand. So I'm Rabbi Huda, Li'olam les Gzeir Shava. In reality, Rabbi Shimon does not subscribe to the Gzeir Shava. V'hachi Kamar, and this is what he means to say. V'chi ne'emar Yad Yamin beKabbalah. Ultimately, again, does it say Yad Yamin beKabbalah? So we'll say, does the Torah ever mention that you have to do Kabbalah with the right hand? However, ne'emar Yad Yamin beKabbalah, since the Torah does not explicitly say that you have to have the right hand for Kabbalah, therefore what? Kibel bismol kasher. So what's Rabbi Shimon? It's a simple shita. Rabbi Shimon essentially says, if it doesn't say it, you can't mandate it. Torah tells us that nesina, the placement of the blood of the mizbeach, has to be done with the right hand. That's the Torah tells me. But the Torah never makes any mention, ultimately again, of the right hand by Kabbalah. Because the Torah never makes any mention of that, therefore what? Even if you received it with the left hand, it is going to be kosher. Amrli Rabba. So Rabbi said, Ihachi, afilu nesina nami. If that's the case, I don't understand. If Kabbalah is kosher with the left hand, then I will say, why wouldn't nesina be kosher with the left hand as well? Va'od, v'chi less Rabbi Shimon Gzeir Shava. Furthermore, is that true that Rabbi Shimon does not hold of the Gzeir Shava? After all, v'hatanya we learned, Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol makom shene'emar yad, eino ela yamin. Whenever Rabbi Shimon says yad, Rabbi will say, yad always refers to what? To the right hand. Etzba, eino ela yamin. So Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion of say that when not only that when it says yad, does yad refer to the right hand, but whenever it says etzba, that refers to the right hand as well. So we'll say, how can you say that Rabbi Shimon doesn't hold of the Gzeir Shava? Rabbi Shimon seems to be saying quite explicitly that yad and etzba always mean the right hand. If that's the case, then how could Rabbi Shimon hold that Kabbalah b'smol be kosher? Ela Amar Rava, rather Rava says, Li olam islay Gzeir Shava. In reality, Rabbi Shimon does hold of the Gzeir Shava. V'hachi ka'amar, and this is what he means to say. V'chinam rayad b'Kabbalah. Hoil v'chinam rayad b'Kabbalah. Does the Torah ever mention yad by Kabbalah? The answer, of course, is no. The Torah doesn't say yad b'Kabbalah. Hoil v'lo nam rayad b'Kabbalah ela etzba v'efshar l'kabla be'etzba. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Torah never uses the word yad by Kabbalah. Rather, what does it talk about? It talks about an etzba. Then I both say, can you do Kabbalah be'etzba? The answer, of course, no. Both remember again, how is Kabbalah done? Kabbalah is ultimately done. Kohen shechs the animal, or someone else shechs the animal. Kohen holds the kli, and ultimately receives the blood in the kli. That's Kabbalah. So could that be done with a finger? The answer, of course, is no. Therefore, again, says the Gemara, v'yafshar the Kabbalah be'etzba. I'm sorry, I skipped line. Hovelo nemra yad be'Kabbalah, ela be'ela etzba. Since the Torah never uses lashon of yad by Kabbalah, but rather just etzba, v'yafshar the Kabbalah be'etzba, and it is impossible to do Kabbalah with a finger. Kibel b'smol kosher. Therefore, if you received it with your left hand, ultimately what? The Kabbalah will be kosher. So first all says the Gemara, Amli Rav Sama Breid Rav Ashi Ravina. It's not true. You could do Kabbalah with your finger. How can you do Kabbalah with your finger? Afshar da'avid le ozen lisfas mizrak umekabelba. Both say, know how you could do Kabbalah with your finger? If you put lisfas mizrak means ozen lisfas. If you put like an antenna, a handle, right? If you put a handle on it, right? If you put literally it means a lip, right? If you put a lip, so the idea is, I will say, there is nothing that, a kli sharis normally did not have a handle on it because you just held it from the bottom or you held it from the side. Technically speaking, if you put a little handle on it that you could loop your finger through, so technically speaking, it's still a kosher kli sharis. So the Gemara says there is a way ultimately again to do Kabbalah be'etzba. Ultimately again, if the kli sharis itself has a handle attached to it. Ela Amar Abaye. So we'll say rather Abaye says this. We'll say Amud Beis. B'mikra nidrush lefanav ula acharav kamiflagi. Rather I will say says the Gemara. The fundamental machlokus between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon, both says how to darshan the pasuk. Both say, remember again, let's go back to the basics. As we said before, the pasuk that we're talking about, if you're both saying question says, V'lakach hakohen midam hadchatos be'etzba'o V'nasan al karnosa mizbeach ha'olam. So we'll say the pasuk says that the kohen will take from the blood of the chatas be'etzba'o with his finger, v'nasan al karnosa mizbeach, and he will go and he will place it on the mizbeach. So we'll say we're understanding that word etzba. That word etzba doesn't just mean etzba, rather it means yad. It means hand as well. So the fundamental machlokes in Shimon and the Rabbanan is how to darshan this pasuk. But I take a look at the top Rashi and Chav Daled Amud Beis. Nedrash, watch this. Rabbi Shimon Silber, Mikra Nedrash la'acharov v'lo lefanov. But Rabbi Shimon holds that a pasuk can be darshaned almost like in a linear fashion, right? That you could only darshan the pasuk. If you want to darshan the word etzba, that drasha only works for that which comes after etzba, v'lo lefanov, but nothing that comes before etzba. Hilchach etzba avenosan d'chsiv basreikoi v'lo avalokach d'siv lakamei. So we'll say ultimately Rabbi Shimon says as follows: when the pasuk says v'lokach hakohen midam achatos be'etzba'o v'nosan, so we'll say the etzba'o is only darshaned for what? For that which comes after it. What comes after etzba'o, we'll say, is nasan. Nasan refers to the nesina, the application of the blood on the mizbeach. Etzba'o refers to what? The right hand. What do you see from here? That nesina, the placement of the blood on the mizbeach, can only be done on the right hand. But does etzba'o tell me anything about v'lakach, the kabbalah of the blood? And the answer is no. Therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, that teaches me that what? Kabbalah can even be done with the left hand. On the other hand, Rashi says, V'rabbanan savri mikra nedrash lefanav ula acharav. Ultimately, again, the Rabbanan holder will say that what? A pasuk can be darshan both forward and backwards. And therefore, again, the word etzba'o rabosai is sandwiched in between v'lakach and v'nasan to teach me that not only is the nesina done with the right hand, but what? The Kabbalah also has to be done with the right hand. So the Gemara is suggesting over here that really what's that play with the machlokes in Rishon, the Rabbanan will say is really how you darshan the pasuk. So Amar Abaye says, Had Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon mafka mid'avua umafka mid'Rabbanan. To which Abaye says as follows: that which Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon just said, ultimately again is different than what his father said, and ultimately again, I should say different. I'm sorry. Mafka mid'avua umafka mid'Rabbanan. It's different than what his father said. Remember, this is the son of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is the son of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon just got finished saying that what? You could do Kabbalah with your left hand. Abai comes along and says, we're about to make a statement in the name of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, which is different than his father Rabbi Shimon, and different than the Rabbanon. This Sanya. What did Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon say? This Sanya. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol makom shene'emar etzba b'Kabbalah, shina b'Kabbalah pasal, b'nesina kasher. So we'll say, watch this. Rabbi Elazar says as follows: Anytime in the Torah that it mentions etzba in reference to Kabbalah, so receiving the blood, that teaches me that what? Shina b'Kabbalah pasal. If you deviated by the Kabbalah will be pasal. But b'nesina, if you deviated with the placement of the blood, then what? Kasher. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Kol makom shenemar etzba b'Kabbalah v'lo b'nesina. So Rabbi Elazar is saying something very interesting. Rabbi Elazar is saying any time that the Torah mentions etzba in direct connection with nesina, the placement of the blood. But let's say, for example, that's our pasuk, right? That's our pasuk. V'lakach hakohen midam achatos be'etzba'o v'nasan, right? So etzba'o is mentioned in direct connection with v'nasan. So kigon haikra dela'el, the Rabbi Shimon darsh etzba'o avalakach tanu lefanav v'lo anasan. Shina b'Kabbalah, I'm just reading Rashi. Shekibel b'smol ka'amar lecha b'makom shenechtav sham titneno v'lo b'ma shenechtabo. So we'll say, Rabbi Shimon says as follows: if etzba is written with Kabbalah, then Shina beKabbalah pasal. Then if ultimately again you changed, you deviated when it comes to Kabbalah, then the Kabbalah will be pasal. B'nesina, but if you deviated with the nesina, i.e. you did it with your left hand, it's kasher. The chomakum shenemar etzba b'nesina, and if etzba is written by nesina, then what? Shina b'nesina pasal, b'Kabbalah kasher. Then if you changed by nesina, ultimately again it will be pasal, but by Kabbalah's kasher. So Rabbi say, interestingly enough, so Rabbi Elazar Shimon is saying something a little bit different. Rabbi Elazar Shimon is saying we have to look at the context in which the word etzba is written. Whatever context or whatever act it is most closely associated with, that's the act that if you deviated, i.e. you did it with the left hand, the avodah will be puzzle. But if you deviate it with the other type of avodah, then ultimately again it will not be puzzle. Vehechan ne'emra etzba b'nesina. We'll say, where do we find the case of where etzba is written with nesina? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, "V'lakachta midam hapar v'nasata al karnos hamizbeach be'etzba'echa." Also, the pasuk says, "You shall take from the dam of the par, and you shall go ahead and what, and place it on the corners of the mizbeach with your finger." So also, so there you see a pasuk of where etzba is written in direct proximity to what? To ultimately again nesina. So v'kasavar mikra nedrash lafanav v'lo lifnei panav v'lo lifnei panav ula acharav. And I will say, apparently again, Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that he holds that a pasuk can only be darshan lafanav, right, immediately before it, and not to that which precedes that which is immediately before it, nor can it be darshaned after it as well. So we'll say, leaving aside the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, the fundamental machlokes we'll say between the Rabbanan and between Rabbi Shimon is as follows. Really what it comes down to is an exegetical machlokes as to how you darshan psukim. Right? You have Rabbi Lazar, you have the Rabbanan saying that the word etzba can be darshan for that which is before it and after it. Before it is Kabbalah, after it is Nesina, teaching me that what? Both Kabbalah and Nesina have to be done with the right hand. On the other hand, Rabbi Shimon says, we only darshan the word etzba for that which comes after it, bless you, not that which comes before it, and therefore halacha l'maaseh is only darshan on the Nesina, not on the Kabbalah. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon paskins that Kabbalah could even be done with the left hand. We'll say, how do we paskin? We paskin like the Rabbanan, that Kabbalah has to be done with, all avodas have to be done with the right hand. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Rachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so we're not, I jumped out a little bit. We're actually not finished with this sugya yet. But Amar Rabbi Rachana, Rabbi Yochanan. Kamakum shenamar etzba ukahuna, eino elo yamin. This is actually very interesting. So Rabbi Yochanan comes along and says as follows: any time that the Torah uses a lashon of etzba and kahuna, it teaches me that the particular avodah in question must be done with the right hand. Kasaka daitin tarti ba'inan. So I guess what you're saying is you need both. You need both etzba and kahuna, and if you have that combination, it teaches you that it has to be done with the right hand. Kidichsiv v'lakach hakoin midam achatos be'etzba'o. The pasuk says that the coin will take from the dam achatos with his finger. With his finger. The yalif mi mitzora. And I will say ultimately we learn this from Mitzorah, because what does it say by Mitzorah? V'taval hakoines etzba'o hayimonis. So we'll say, interestingly enough, by Mitzorah, it says that the Kohen will immerse, he will be tovel, his right finger. Right? This is talking about the applications ultimately on the Mitzorah. V'taval hakoines etzba'o hayimonis. So we'll say, what the Gemara is asking is as follows. Since by Mitzorah, it says etzba'o hayimonis, so we learn from there that what? We darshan from there that wherever it says etzba, etzba always means what? The right. There wasn't that. We've already established it, by the way, doesn't just mean the right finger, it actually means what? Or at least in the context of general karbanos, the right hand. Says the Gemara, Hari Kamitza, Delok Sivba Ela Kahuna. Yet, so now what you're telling me is as follows. That whenever you see the word combination of etzba and kahuna, that teaches me that what? That the particular avodah in question has to be done with the right hand. But one second, what about by kamitza, Rabosai? By kamitza, delok siv ba'ela kahuna. Rabosai, by kamitza, the Torah doesn't mention the word etzba, but it does mention the word kahuna. Yet we learned Utanan, kometz bismal pasal. We learned Rabosai that what? That if one does kamitza with their left hand, ultimately the avodah is pasal. Rabosai, so what do you see from here? Even when it just says kahuna, even it just says etzba, that tells me that what? That the avodah has to be done with the right. Ela Amar Rava, rather Rava says, O etzba, O kahuna. But so wherever the Torah writes the word etzba or the word kahuna, it teaches me that what? The avodah must be done with the right hand. Amar the Abai says, but one second, Hari holachas evarim lekevesh, dichsev behu kahuna. This is the Gemara says, dichsev behu kahuna. But what about, we'll say, the taking of the limbs to the ramp of the Mizbeach? So remember again, we'll say we'll get into all of these interesting halachas, but the taking of the limbs to the ramp, we'll say, is part of the avoda, right before the limbs are burned. And yet, what's the halacha? Dichsiv b'hu kahuna. We'll say now there, the taking of the limbs, Torah uses the word kahuna. Dichsiv v'hikriv hakohen es hakol v'hiktir hamizbecha. The pasuk says, and the kohen will go ahead and offer up everything, and he will burn it on the mizbeach. Va'amar mar zu holachas evarim lekevesh. This refers what? To the taking of the limbs to the ramp. And yet, Tanan we learned, haregel shel yamin bismolo ubeis ora lechutz. And yet, the Mishnah tells us that what? When the kohen is actually a very interesting halacha. When the kohen is carrying the limb, Rabbi say, v'haregel shel yamin bismolo. Right, he ultimately takes. He goes ahead and he takes the right leg in his left hand, in the kohen's left hand. Ubeis ora lechutz. Both say this is actually, again, we'll see a lot of these halachas when he carries the limb. Both saying. So remember again, this is only one. The limb is detached, obviously, from the rest of the animal. We don't want the part of where the leg was detached to be visible. So he has to carry the limb in such a way where only the outer part of the limb, i.e. the hide is visible, the flesh is visible, but the part where it was detached is not visible. So we'll say, but the point over here is that what? Where is he carrying it? Where is he carrying it? He's carrying it in his left hand. And yet the pasuk says the word what? The pasuk says the word kahuna. Kiar minan. So you see from here that again, even when it says kahuna, lav dafka, that it means that you have to do it with your right hand. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Kiar minan o etzbo kahuna bedavar hama'akev kapara dumri dimensora. But say, when do we say that if the Torah says, just follow this for a second, when do we say that if the Torah says etzba or kahuna, it has to be done with the right hand? That's only what? Davar hama'akev kapara. That's only what we'll say for a part of sacrificial service that is ma'akiv the kapara. That if you don't do it, then what? Then the avoda is compromised. Dumya the mitzora. We'll say comparable to mitzora. Remember again, we're learning this all out from mitzora. And we'll say now the carrying of the limbs to the ramp of the mizbeach is important and is part of the avoda, but is it ma'akiv the kapara? And the answer is no. V'haraya, we'll say for some reason the limbs were never taken to the mizbeach. Is the carbon still good? And the answer, of course, is yes. So because it's not a piece that is ma'akiv the kapara, even if the kohen did it with his left hand, it's going to be totally fine. V'hari kabbalah. V'hari kabbalah dichsibu. Also, what about the receiving of the blood? Kabbalah dichsiv bahu kihuna. Right, the pasuk says kahuna. V'davar hama'akiv b'kaparahu. And we'll say the Kabbalah is one of the 4 blood avodos and is therefore a necessary part of the kapara. Utnaya, what did we learn? Kibel b'smol. If you did Kabbalah with your left hand, pasul. Ultimately, again, the Rabbanon say that it's pasul. Rabbi Shimon machshir. Yet Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. So I don't understand. If every single time the Torah says kahuna by davar hama'akev, by something that is a necessary part of the sacrificial service, it means you have to do it with your right hand. Then how could Rabbi Shimon say that if you did Kabbalah with your left hand that it's kosher? To which the Gemara says, no. Rabbi Shimon tarti boy. Well, say in reality, Rabbi Shimon actually requires both. Rabbi Shimon ultimately requires the word etzba and kahuna. It's only where the Torah says both etzba and kahuna that it tells you that it has to be done with the right hand. But if it doesn't have both etzba and kahuna, what does that teach me? That it could even be done with the left. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Me by Rabbi Shimon Tarti, is that true that Rabbi Shimon requires both etzba and kahuna? Vatanya, we learned, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kol makom shene'emar yad, wherever the Torah says yad, eino elo yamin. So we'll say yad in the Torah always refers to the right hand. Etzba, eino elo yamin. Ultimately, again, so too when it says etzba, etzba also teaches me that what? That has to be done with the right hand. Etzba, so we'll say, so you see from here that what? That according to Rabbi Shimon, even if you just have yad or you have etzba, then what? That teaches you the right hand. You don't need both etzba and kahuna. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Etzba lo baya kahuna. But so where the Torah uses the word etzba, that means right hand, even if what? Even if it is not accompanied by the word kahuna. Kahuna baya etzba. But I will say the word kahuna by itself is not strong enough to teach you need the right hand, only if it's accompanied by what? by the word etzba. Ve'ela kohen lamali. So if that's the case, then what does the word kohen teach me? Bikihunan. The teaching of said that ultimately, again, for the avoda to be effective, the kohen has to be wearing the big day kahuna. I've harizrika. We'll say, what about by zrika, by the sprinkling of the blood, where the Torah doesn't write yad, the Torah doesn't write etzba, the Torah just uses the word kahuna. Utnan, yet we learned what? Zarak bismal pasal. V'lapalag Rabbi Shimon. Here we'll say we learned by zrika that what? That if you sprinkle the blood with your left hand, ultimately the avodah is pasal. And even Rabbi Shimon agrees with that. Say now again, so what's going on over here? By zrika, I don't have etzba, I don't have yad, all I have is kahuna, and yet we see that it has to be done with the right hand. Rabbi palig bebraisa. Sabai says ultimately again they're arguing in a brisa. The sanya kibel b'small pasal. If you did kabbalah with the left hand, the Rabbanan say it's pasal. Rabbi Shimon machshir. Rabbi Shimon says that it's kosher. Zorak b'small pasal. Ultimately, what happens if you did zrika with your left hand? The Rabbanan say that it is pasal. For Rabbi Shimon machshir. Oh, so this is actually quite amazing. So there is a brisa that brings down that Rabbi Shimon holds that not only is Kabbalah b'small kosher, but what? Zrika b'small is kosher as well. Elahada amarava. But what about that which Rava said? Yad l'kmitza, regel l'chalitza, ozen l'ritzia. So lamali. So I will say, but 1 second. What about ultimately again? So remember, Rava learns out Gzer Shava of yad for kmitza. Tell me that just like ultimately again, the yad by the mitzora, right, has to be done with the right. So too kmitza has to be done with the right. Regel mechalitza also says Gzer Shava teaches that chalitza has to be done with the right foot. And ozen l'ritzia teaches me that what the Gzer Shava, that when piercing the ear of the Eved Ivri who does not want to leave, you do it on the right ear as well. Now, both say what the Gemara is asking over here is lamali. Why do I need the Gzer Shava by kmitza? By kmitza, I could just learn out from the pasuk itself that it has to be done with the right hand. Why do I need the Gzer Shava? To which the Gemara says, Midraba barbarchana. Sorry, lamali midraba barbarchana nafka chad lechometz v'chad lekidush chometz. Kometz, excuse me. Both say to which ultimately again we learn two different things. One ultimately teaches me that what? From Rabbi Barachana, we learn out one drasha for the kometz and one drasha for kiddush chometz. So Shabbos, look at Rashi just a moment. Midirabba bar barchana nafka dak skuna ksibe. So also by kamitza, we're learning two things. There's the Gzer Shava of yad and the word kahuna. Both teach me that I need to use the right hand. Why do I need two limudim for the right hand? I'll tell you why, says the Gemara. One is to teach me the kiddush kometz. Rashi says bekli shares sheyehei biyamin sheyochaz haklishu mekadish v'biyad ha'yamar. So what it teaches me is as follows. One drasha teaches me that the kometz itself has to be taken. I'm using my left hand. Has to be taken with the right hand. The kometz itself is taken with the right hand. And it's drasha number one. And drasha number two says what? The kometz has to be placed into a kli shares. When Rabbi say the placement of that kometz takes place in the kli shares, the kli shares must also be held in the right hand. Now I know what you're thinking. How do you pull that off? So we'll say the Rishonim brings down, you see from here, Mafur Shiraya, that the avoda for the mincha had to be done with two kohanim. There was one Kohen who did the kamitza with his right hand, and there was a second Kohen, this is how the Rambam Paskins as well, there was a second Kohen who was holding the kli shares with his right hand. The Kohen who had the kamitza in his right hand placed the kamitza into a kli shares being held by a Kohen in his right hand. So we'll say therefore the two drashas, bless you, the two drashas of right teach me that the kamitza has to be done and the holding of the kli shares has to be done. So we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up the with the sheet of Rabbi Shimon tomorrow.